The HOA closed my ranch because of my gaudy fence. Wait until you see what I did next. The HOA closed my ranch because of my fence, a fence that to them was too gaudy. But I didn't back down. They thought they could push me around. They thought they could break me. What they didn't know, I had a plan that would leave them speechless. It wasn't just a fence anymore. It was war, and I was going to win. Welcome to HOA Secrets Uncovered. Hey everyone, I'm Mark, and welcome to my channel. I live right here in a small suburban neighborhood where things aren't always as peaceful as they seem. You might think these HOA stories are just rumors, but trust me, they're real. And today, I'm going to share with you how I took on an HOA that tried to tear me down, and how I ended up turning the tables in a way they never saw coming. So sit back, grab some popcorn, and let's dive into this insane story. The HOA closed my ranch because of my fence. I couldn't believe it when I first got that letter. My hands were shaking as I read the words over and over. The fence you've installed on your property has been deemed too gaudy, and it violates our community standards. Too gaudy? My fence? My pride and joy? I had worked for months on it, picking out each post, each color, each design. It was meant to stand out, to show off the beauty of my property. But they didn't see it that way. They had a problem with it. And what's worse, they were threatening me with a fine. That's when I knew things were about to get ugly. At first, I tried to understand. Maybe I was being dramatic. Maybe it wasn't that bad. So I went down to the HOA office. I wanted to talk to someone. I needed to hear it from their mouths. But when I got there, it was worse than I imagined. The HOA president. She smiled at me, but it wasn't a friendly smile. "You know," she said, "the community has certain standards. We can't just let anyone come in here and do whatever they want." I nodded, but something about the way she said it made my blood boil. She didn't care about the community. She didn't care about me. She cared about control. And that was the moment it hit me. This wasn't just about the fence anymore. It wasn't about a simple violation. It was about power. She thought she could control me, break me, and make me submit. But I wasn't going down without a fight. I went back to my ranch, my mind racing. How could they do this to me? Why were they picking on me? I had followed the rules. Well, mostly. But this was different. This wasn't just a simple mistake. This was a power move. I wanted to tear that letter up, but I kept it. I knew I needed it for later. I sat there, staring at my fence, and I started to wonder, what was I going to do? Was I really going to let them push me around? Or was there something I could do to turn the tables on them? I wasn't the kind of guy to just give in. I never had been. But this HOA, they were something else. They didn't just want to regulate lawns and mailboxes. They wanted to control everything. I'd seen the way they treated others in the neighborhood, the petty fines, the power trips. They thought they could control us, but I wasn't going to let them control me. That's when I started thinking, what if I could take away their power? What if I could do something so unexpected that it would leave them speechless? I didn't know how yet, but I knew one thing for sure. I was going to make them regret crossing me. I started researching the rules, digging through the fine print, and that's when I found it. A loophole, a tiny little detail that none of them had thought about. But it was enough to change everything. I didn't have to tear down the fence. I didn't have to follow their ridiculous demands. What if I could turn the tables? What if I could take control of the situation in a way they never saw coming? As I stood there, staring at the gate to my ranch, The plan started forming in my mind. It wasn't going to be easy, but I could do it. And when I was done, the HOA would be the ones left in the dust. But how far was I willing to go? How far could I push things before it all backfired? I didn't waste any time. After that meeting with the HOA president, I went straight back to my ranch. But this time, I was seeing it with new eyes. It wasn't just a fence anymore. It wasn't just about me wanting to stand out. It was a battle, and they had made the first move. I could feel the tension in the air, the letters, the fines. They were coming. I knew that. But I wasn't about to just sit there and let them control me. I wanted to make them regret their decision, to show them that they weren't the only ones who could play the game of power. I started researching everything, every little detail about the land, about the neighborhood. I wanted to know everything. And then it hit me. The HOA didn't own the road that led to my ranch. I did. For years, I never paid much attention to it. It seemed like just another piece of property, nothing special. But now, with everything going on, I realized it was the one thing the HOA didn't control. And that's when my plan began to take shape. I wasn't just going to fight back. I was going to take their power away. The road, the only road leading to the neighborhood, was mine. I could control who got in and who didn't. I could close it off. I could block them completely. And that's exactly what I did. I'll admit, at first, I didn't even fully realize what I was doing. But once I'd made the decision, there was no going back. I went to the county office, pulled the deeds, and made the necessary arrangements. And then I bought it. The road was mine. It was a strange feeling, the kind of power you never really understand until it's in your hands. I couldn't help but smile as I walked out of the office. The HOA thought they could control me, with their letters, their fines, their threats. But now, I was the one in control. I went back to my ranch, standing in front of the fence. It wasn't just a fence anymore. It was a symbol of my defiance. The HOA had tried to break me, but I wasn't going to let them win. I didn't tell anyone what I was about to do. I didn't tell my neighbors, and I didn't tell my family. I wanted them to see. I wanted the HOA to see that I wasn't afraid of them. The next morning, I walked out to the road. I stood there, looking down the long stretch of pavement, the only access to the entire neighborhood, the one thing that tied everyone together. And then I locked the gate. Just like that, I had control of the only road that connected the entire neighborhood to the outside world. I could see it now. The HOA's reaction, the panic, the confusion. They thought they could break me, but I was breaking them instead. I knew it wouldn't be long before they came knocking, demanding that I open the road. But that was the beauty of it. They couldn't do anything without me. I went back to my house and waited. The first letter arrived a few days later. It was from the HOA, of course, and it was just as expected. They demanded that I open the road, that I allow access to the rest of the neighborhood. But here's the thing. I didn't have to. I didn't have to comply with their demands anymore. I held all the cards. It was an incredible feeling, like I had finally taken back control of my life. But of course, they didn't give up that easily. They sent more letters. They called. They showed up at my door. But I was ready. I didn't back down. It was starting to feel like a game now. A game I was determined to win. They were losing their grip on the community, and I could see it in their eyes. They didn't know what to do. The HOA president came by, trying to stay calm, trying to play the part. She smiled at me. But it was clear that smile wasn't real anymore. "You're making a big mistake," she said. I looked her straight in the eye. "No, you are. You thought you could control me. But now, I'm in charge." Her face turned red, and for a moment, I saw something, a crack in her armor. She wasn't used to being challenged. And that was when I knew. I had them. They could threaten me all they wanted, but they couldn't touch me now. They couldn't do anything without my permission. I could already hear the whispers around the neighborhood. Some neighbors were cheering me on. Others were scared. They didn't know what to think. But I knew one thing for sure. The HOA was no longer the powerful force it once was. But then, something unexpected happened. The HOA president started showing up at my door more often. But it wasn't just to argue. She started asking questions. She started trying to make deals. At first, I wasn't sure what to make of it. Was she giving up? Was she really going to admit defeat? Or was there something more going on here? Something deeper that I didn't see coming? I wasn't prepared for what happened next. It started with a knock on my door. And a letter. I had just settled down with a cup of coffee when I heard it, a sharp, urgent knock at my front door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I wasn't expecting any more HOA nonsense. But there it was, in my hand, the next letter from the HOA. I already knew what it was. I could feel it in my gut. This was their way of fighting back, their way of telling me they weren't going to go down without a fight. The letter was thick, heavy with authority, almost as if it had weight to it. I ripped it open, and there it was. A formal demand for me to open the road. They claimed that they owned the road, that it was vital for community access, and if I didn't comply, well, they were going to get lawyers involved. I smiled. It wasn't just the typical HOA threats this time. They were serious. They were pulling out all the stops. This was a battle now, not just a disagreement over a gaudy fence, but a full-blown war. I sat back, staring at the letter. It had all the usual threats, the legal jargon, the implied power, and I realized something. This wasn't about a fence anymore. It was about their pride. They couldn't accept that they were being challenged. They couldn't accept that they might not be in control. And that made me smile even more. You see, the thing with the HOA is, they think they run the show. They think that because they have a bit of power, they can make the rules, control the neighborhood, and impose their will on everyone else. But what they didn't know was that they were walking into something far bigger than they could handle. I wasn't just a homeowner anymore. I was their worst nightmare. So I did what any rational person would do when faced with a bully. I played the game their way. I picked up the phone. It was time to make a call. I wasn't going to be intimidated, and I wasn't going to back down. I was going to make them regret thinking they could mess with me. I dialed the number for the HOA office and Dee waited. The phone rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Finally, someone picked up. "Hello, this is Karen from the HOA. How may I assist you?" Her voice was dripping with that faux politeness that I knew all too well. The kind of politeness that makes your skin crawl. "Karen, this is your name. The homeowner at your address. I've received your letter." There was a pause. I could feel her stiffening on the other end. "Yes, of course. We just want to remind you of the community rules regarding access." "Karen," I interrupted her, keeping my tone calm but firm. "I've read your letter. I understand your demands." I paused for a moment, letting that hang in the air. "But I don't think you fully understand my position," I continued. "The road you're talking about, It's mine, not yours. I own it. And unless you want to start a legal battle over this, I suggest you rethink your approach." There was a long, uncomfortable silence. I could almost hear her brain working overtime, trying to figure out how to respond. She finally spoke, her voice wavering just a little. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting," I said slowly, "that I have the power here now. The road is closed. It stays closed until I say otherwise. If you want access, you'll need to negotiate on my terms." I could hear her sigh heavily. "This isn't over," she snapped, clearly rattled. I smiled to myself as I hung up the phone. The ball was in my court now. I knew they weren't going to give up easily. They never do. But something about that phone call, the way she sounded, it told me everything I needed to know. They were starting to lose control. But what was I going to do next? What move should I make to make sure they knew I wasn't playing around anymore? The next few days were interesting, to say the least. The HOA didn't just sit back and take it. Oh no, they escalated things. They started sending me 4 letters, threatening me with everything from fines to legal action. They even had the audacity to send someone over to inspect my property, as if they had any right to do that anymore. I was ready for them. But then, things took a strange turn. I came home one afternoon to find a message waiting for me. It was from one of my neighbors, a guy I'd never really spoken to before. He was an older gentleman, living a few houses down, and he was known for keeping to himself. The message was simple. "I know what you're doing, and I want in." I was intrigued. I called him up. His voice was low, like he was trying to hide something. "I've had enough of the HOA, too. They've been making our lives miserable for years. If you're really going to take them down, count me in." I was shocked. I thought I was alone in this. But here was someone who felt just like I did. We made plans to meet up and talk strategy. That night, I sat down with him, and we hashed out a plan. The thing was, the HOA wasn't just after me. They were after anyone who dared to step out of line, anyone who didn't fit their perfect little suburban image. And it turned out a lot of people in the neighborhood felt the same way I did. They were just too scared to speak up. But now we had a team. The more we talked, the more we realized how many people were fed up with the HOA's ridiculous rules. They had been walking all over everyone for far too long. And now they were about to find out what happens when you push the wrong person too far. But here's the thing. What if this went too far? What if we were overestimating our power? Would it be worth it? Or would it all come crashing down? The next letter arrived like a punch to the gut. I had expected more threats, more legal jargon, but this one was different. It wasn't just about fines anymore. It wasn't just about forcing me to comply with their ridiculous demands. No, this letter was a declaration of war. The HOA had upped the stakes. It started off with the usual formalities. "We regret to inform you," and then the list of demands. But there was something else, something more chilling. They had involved a lawyer. A real live attorney was now in the mix. It wasn't just a few pettiness from the board anymore. It was an official legal battle. And that wasn't all. They had included a cease and desist order. They weren't asking me to open the road, they were demanding it. They said if I didn't comply within the next 48 hours, they would seek a court order to force me. That's right, a court order. I stared at the letter for a long time, the words blurred together. I could feel my blood boiling. This wasn't just about a fence or a road anymore. This was about power. The HOA thought they could intimidate me. They thought they could make me back down with their fancy legal threats. But there was one thing they didn't know. When you back me into a corner, I don't just give up. I thought about it long and hard. I could feel their eyes on me, the weight of their arrogance pushing me to give in. But that wasn't going to happen. I had spent too much time and effort building my case. I had researched every law, every loophole. I had taken the road. I had blocked the access. And now they were trying to intimidate me into backing down. It felt like a game now, and I was playing to win. The funny thing about these situations is how quickly the tables can turn. One moment, I was the one in the hot seat, trying to explain myself to the HOA board. Now they were the ones scrambling. So I did what I always do when I'm pushed. I pushed back. I called up my lawyer, someone I'd been keeping on retainer for just this kind of situate. Ian. His name was Rick. He was sharp, quick with a response, and never fazed by a bully. "You got their letter?" he asked, his voice cool as ice. "I did. You're not backing down, are you?" "Not a chance." We spent the next few hours going over the specifics. Rick reassured me that I had the upper hand. The road was mine, and the HOA couldn't just bully me into compliance, but they were going to try. He said they'd probably escalate things to court, but I had a solid case. The more I thought about it, the more it fired me up. They thought they could use their lawyer to scare me? No, I had a lawyer too, and now we were playing their game. But as we wrapped up the call, Rick gave me a warning. "Don't get too cocky, okay? They may have the legal system on their side, but you've got something they don't, and that's leverage. Use it." That advice stuck with me. Leverage. They thought they could control me with their lawyer, with their court threats, but what they didn't realize was that the real power was in my hands. The HOA had spent years building up their authority, but in the end, they were only as powerful as the people who allowed them to be, and I wasn't just going to stand by and let them push me around. A few days later, I got a call. It was from Karen, the HOA president, the same one who had smiled at me during our first meeting. I could tell she was trying to sound calm, but there was an edge to her voice. "I think we need to talk," she said, her words measured. "This is getting out of hand." "I agree," I replied, keeping my tone even. "But I think you'll find that I'm in control now." There was a pause, and then she sighed. "Listen, we don't want this to go to court. That's not what we're looking for. We just want you to open the road, comply with the community rules." I couldn't help but laugh. "You've sent me 4 letters, threatened me with court, and now you're telling me that you don't want this to go to court?" "Well, no, but we want to avoid escalation," she said. "If you open the road, we can find a way to work this out. We don't need this getting ugly." Now it was my turn to laugh. "Ugly? You've been trying to force me to comply for weeks. The only thing that's ugly is the way you've been handling this." "I'm not the one holding all the cards here," she snapped. "You may think you've won, but this will get ugly for you if you don't stop this now." I could feel the pressure building in her voice, and it was clear she was trying to regain control. But it wasn't going to happen. I wasn't backing down. "I'm not going to open the road," I said calmly. "And there's nothing you can do to make me. You want the road open? You'll have to go through me. Legally." "You're making a mistake," Karen warned, her voice shaking slightly. "Maybe. But this ends on my terms, not yours." I hung up the phone with a sense of satisfaction. She was rattled, and that was the moment I knew I had the upper hand. But here's the thing. What if I pushed too far? What if I was underestimating their ability to retaliate? What if they had more tricks up their sleeves? The day I closed the road was the day everything changed. I thought I was prepared for the fallout, But nothing could have prepared me for how quickly things spiraled out of control. The HOA had already sent their threats, their lawyers' letters, and their empty warnings. But I wasn't scared. I had the upper hand. The road was mine, and I had every legal right to block it. The HOA couldn't do a thing about it without me opening the gates. I was untouchable, or so I thought. But that morning, everything shifted. I woke up to a feeling in the pit of my stomach, a strange kind of calm mixed with anxiety. I knew something big was about to happen, but I wasn't sure exactly what. The sun was barely up when I heard the sound of engines approaching. I walked outside, squinting against the early morning light, and there they were, the HOA's goons, a small convoy of trucks and cars, pulling up to the locked gate I had so carefully secured. For a moment, I just stood there, watching them. The lead truck was an old, beaten-up van, but the people in the truck, they looked official, too official for my liking. I could see the HOA logo on the side of the vehicle, and then a man stepped out. He was tall, wearing dark sunglasses, and moving with a purpose. I was instantly on edge. This wasn't just a neighborhood dispute anymore. This was personal. I took a deep breath. This was it. The moment I had been waiting for, the showdown. The man walked toward me with a confident swagger, his steps deliberate and slow. When he was close enough, he removed his sunglasses, revealing cold, calculating eyes. "Morning," he said, his voice surprisingly calm. "I'm Rick, from the HOA, and I think it's time we talk." I folded my arms, keeping my cool. "What's there to talk about? You know the road is mine, and I'm not opening it." He smiled, one of those fake I'm-in-control smiles. "Oh, I'm aware of that. But you see, we're past the talking stage. You've made this personal, and now we're here to handle it." "Handle it how?" I asked, my voice steady despite the rising tension. "We're not here to negotiate," he said, his eyes narrowing. "We're here to give you one last chance to do the right thing. Open the gate, and we'll forget about this. Otherwise—" He trailed off, letting the threat hang in the air. I couldn't help but laugh. "Is this your big move? You think I'm going to be scared of some guy in a truck with a bunch of HOA stickers on it?" Rick didn't laugh. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a piece of paper. Another letter, this time stamped with an official court date. "We've already filed," he said, dropping the letter into my hands. "This is your official notice. If you don't comply, the court will decide for you. We'll make sure you never build anything again. No more fences, no more roads, nothing." I stood there reading the paper, but I couldn't believe what I was seeing. A court order? They weren't bluffing this time. But as I stood there, holding the paper, something started to sink in. They thought they had me cornered, that this was the end of the road for me. But I wasn't about to give up now. "I'm not opening the gate," I said again, this time more firmly. "You're wasting your time." Rick's smile faded. "You're making a big mistake. You're just one man. You can't take us all on. We have the power, we have the resources, and we have the law on our side." I looked him in the eye. "You think that scares me? You think you can break me with a court date and a few threats? You're wrong." The tension between us thickened. For a moment we just stood there, staring each other down. And then Rick took a step back, looking over his shoulder at the other men in the trucks. "This isn't over," he said, his voice low. "You've pushed us too far. We'll be back. And next time, we won't be as nice." With that, he turned and walked back to his truck, leaving me standing there, the letter in my hands. I watched them drive off, the sound of their engines echoing in the quiet of the morning. But as they disappeared down the road, I realized something. This was far from over. If anything, the real battle was just beginning. I had thought they'd back down after I blocked the road. I thought they would just give up, But now I could see it clearly. They were playing for keeps. And I wasn't just fighting for a fence anymore. I was fighting for my right to stand up to them. To stand up to the system they'd built that had hurt so many people in this neighborhood. As I stood there watching them leave, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. They thought they were in control, but they hadn't seen the big picture. But the question was, how far was I willing to go to win this? What if the fight wasn't as simple as I thought it would be? What if this turned into something bigger than I ever imagined? Would I be able to handle it? The next few days felt like a game of chess. I had made my move, and the HOA had made theirs, but I wasn't sure how far they were willing to go. Sure, they had the courts on their side, but I had something they didn't: determination. They might have had the law, but I had the heart to fight for what was mine. And sometimes that's what it takes to win. The letters kept coming, one after another, each one more threatening than the last, each one a reminder that the HOA wasn't backing down. They'd filed for the court order, but there was still no resolution, no closure. They were trying to suffocate me with paperwork, with bureaucracy, and I was starting to feel the pressure. But the thing was, I didn't just have the road. I had something else. I had leverage. The day after the HOA sent their final warning, I was in my living room when I got a knock at the door. I thought it might be a delivery or maybe one of the neighbors, but when I opened it, I was greeted by a man in a suit. He didn't look like a delivery guy. He looked official. Too official. "I'm here on behalf of the HOA," he said, holding up a legal document. "I've been instructed to serve you with this." He handed me a thick envelope. My stomach dropped. Another court order, another battle I wasn't ready for. I took it from him, my fingers trembling just slightly. "I'll be waiting outside," he said, his tone cold and indifferent. "We're not done yet." I closed the door, feeling the weight of the envelope in my hands. I could already hear the wheels turning in my head. They were serious now. This was more than just a neighborhood dispute. This was war. I opened the envelope and found not one but two legal documents. One was a formal request for an emergency injunction to force me to reopen the road. The other, a property lien. The HOA had attached a lien to my ranch. They were trying to take away everything I'd worked for. I sat down on the couch, feeling the weight of the situation sink in. It was one thing to deal with petty fines and threats, but this was different. The HOA wasn't just trying to get me to comply. They were trying to strip me of my rights. They were going after everything I had. But I wasn't going to let them win. I called Rick, my lawyer. "We need to move fast," I said, my voice tight with urgency. "They're hitting us hard now. We have to fight back or they'll take everything." Rick's voice was calm on the other end. "Don't worry. You're not alone in this. We've got options. You just need to hold on. Let's take this step by step." We spent hours on the phone, going over every detail of the documents. Rick was reassuring, but I could hear the concern in his voice. The HOA was playing a dangerous game, and I wasn't sure what they were willing to do next. The property lien was a serious threat. If they won, they could sell my ranch to satisfy the lien. That was the moment I realized how high the stakes had become. It wasn't just about a fence anymore. It wasn't just about the road. The HOA was trying to take everything I had. But I wasn't about to let that happen. We filed a response, challenging the lien and requesting a court hearing to contest the injunction. It wasn't going to be easy, but it was the only way to protect my property. I wasn't going to back down. Not now. Not ever. The following week, I received a letter from the court. My hearing was scheduled. The HOA was ready to bring their full legal team, and I was ready to face them. The stakes were higher than ever, but I wasn't going to let fear control me. I had something to fight for. My ranch, my home, my freedom. The day of the hearing, I arrived early, my heart pounding in my chest. I had no idea what was going to happen, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going down without a fight. When I walked into the courtroom, I was met by the sight of the HOA's legal team. They were all dressed in expensive suits, sitting behind a large desk, their faces smug with confidence. They thought they had me cornered. But what they didn't know was that I had one last card to play. As the hearing began, the judge looked at me and nodded, signaling for me to make my case. I stood up, feeling the weight of everyone's gaze on me. But I wasn't intimidated. Not anymore. "I'm here today because the HOA is trying to strip me of my rights," I began, my voice steady. "They've already threatened to take my ranch. They've filed liens against me. And now, they're trying to control my property by forcing me to open a road that's legally mine. I'm not just here to fight for my fence or my road. I'm here to fight for my right to live freely without being bullied by a group of people who think they have more power than they actually do." I could see the judge nodding, his face impassive. But I could also see the HOA's legal team shifting uncomfortably in their seats. They didn't like the fact that I was standing up for myself. The HOA lawyer stood up, adjusting his glasses. "Your Honor, this is a clear case of property violation. The road is vital to the neighborhood's access. It's not just about one person's fence, it's about the community as a whole." But I wasn't done. I stood up again, cutting him off. "It's not about the community, it's about control. The HOA has been bullying people in this neighborhood for years, forcing them to follow rules that don't make any sense. And I'm not the only one who's tired of it. I've spoken to my neighbors. They're afraid to speak out, but I won't be silenced. Not anymore." The courtroom was silent for a moment. I could feel the tension in the air. The judge was listening, and for the first time, I felt like I might actually have a chance. But just when I thought I had them, the judge looked at me and said something that made my heart sink. "I understand your position, Mr. Your last name, but I must remind you that the HOA has legal rights to enforce their regulations." I wasn't about to let them win, not yet. But did I have enough to beat them? Was this going to be the moment everything turned around, or the moment I lost everything? The tension in the courtroom was unbearable. The judge's words hung in the air, and for a split second, it felt like everything I'd worked for, the fight, the planning, the countless hours of research, was crumbling right in front of me. The HOA had the law on their side. They had the resources. And here I was, just a homeowner trying to protect what was mine. But then something shifted in the room. I felt a surge of adrenaline course through me. I wasn't going to let this be the end. Not now. I stood tall, my heart pounding in my chest, but my voice steady. "Your Honor," I began, "I understand that the HOA has regulations, but these regulations are being used to strip away the rights of people in this neighborhood. It's not just about me. It's about everyone who's ever been bullied into compliance. They've been using their power to control us for far too long, and I won't let them control me anymore." I could feel the eyes of the courtroom on me, some of them skeptical, others intrigued. But I wasn't going to back down. This wasn't just a case about property or offense. This was about something bigger. It was about standing up for what was right, about taking a stand against an organization that thought it could crush anyone who dared to challenge it. The judge looked at me, his face hard to read. "Mr. Your last name, I appreciate your passionate defense. However, this court must still follow the law. The HOA's regulations are there for a reason." "And that's just it," I interrupted, surprising myself. "They say those rules are for the good of the community, but that's a lie. They've been using these rules to push people around, to make us feel like we have no choice but to obey. They've been using their power to take control, and I'm here to tell you that we're done being controlled." The courtroom was silent for a long time. The judge shifted in his seat, clearly taken aback by the intensity of my words. But that silence wasn't just discomfort. It was uncertainty. For the first time in this entire process, I saw doubt in their eyes. The HOA's lawyer stood up, his face flushed with anger. "Your Honor, this is clearly an attempt to subvert the system. The defendant is using a personal vendetta as an excuse to break community rules. We can't allow this kind of behavior. It would set a dangerous precedent for every neighborhood, everywhere." I could feel the heat rising in my chest, but I held it in. This wasn't about me anymore. It was about all the neighbors who had been too afraid to speak up. It was about everyone who had silently suffered under the thumb of the HOA, too scarce to question the system. I looked at the judge and then at the HOA's legal team. Is this really about rules, or is it about control? The HOA has been using its rules to crush people, to force them into submission. And now, when someone stands up to them, you want to silence me with threats and court orders. This isn't about protecting the community. It's about protecting an outdated system of power. The judge didn't respond right away. He sat back in his chair, rubbing his temples. The silence in the courtroom was thick, as though everyone was holding their breath. The air felt heavy, and I could feel my heart beating louder than ever. Then the judge spoke, his voice calm but measured. "I've heard enough. I'll take everything into consideration. This court will reconvene tomorrow to deliver a ruling." And just like that, the moment I had been waiting for had arrived. But I still wasn't sure if it was going to be the victory I'd hoped for. What would the judge decide? Would he side with me, the underdog who had fought back against the HOA's iron grip? Or would he side with the powerful organization that had control of the community? That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, tossing and turning, thinking about everything that had happened. The battle wasn't just about the road or the fence anymore. It was about so much more. It was about standing up to the bullies, about taking back control, about fighting for what was right. I thought about the neighbors who had come to me, those who had quietly supported me. I thought about all the letters I had received from people telling me that they were scared to speak out, but were silently cheering me on. It was for them, for all of us who had been pushed around, that I was doing this. The next day, I sat in the courtroom once again. The atmosphere was tense. I could feel the weight of the moment hanging over me. The judge had promised a ruling, and now it was time to see if all of my efforts, all of my risk, would pay off. The judge entered the courtroom, his robe flowing behind him. He sat down, looked over at both sides, and cleared his throat. Everyone fell silent. "After careful consideration," the judge began, his voice steady, "this court finds that while the HOA does have the authority to enforce its regulations, it must also respect the rights of homeowners. The actions taken by the HOA in this case, particularly the liens and threats, were excessive and unjustified. Therefore, I am ruling in favor of the defendant, Mr. Your last name, and the road will remain closed." I could hardly believe what I was hearing. The court had sided with me. The road was mine, and the HOA had lost. I had won. I glanced around the courtroom. The HOA's legal team was visibly stunned, their faces pale. The judge's ruling had hit them hard, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a rush of relief wash over me. But as I stood there, I realized something. Winning this battle was just the beginning. There was still work to do. The HOA wouldn't give up easily. They would lick their wounds and try to come back, but now I knew I had the strength to stand up to them. The victory felt sweet, but I couldn't forget the fight ahead.